Welcome to the Video Insiders Podcast. I'm Carlos Pacheco.
And I'm Tom Martin.
Who doesn't sound too good this week, not because he has a coronavirus, but because he's just left Brexit.
We do not talk politics on this show, Carlos, please.
All right. We are two grizzled YouTube veterans with billions of views between us, and we're here to give you our 2 cents on the business of YouTube so you can make more money. News, strategy, insights, and just a sprinkle of what, Tom?
Snark.
What's going on this week other than wearing a face mask?
Yeah, apart from lots of sniffles and coughs and colds, just keeping busy, keep on keeping on. Found out this week that I'm going to be speaking at yet another conference.
Whoa.
So I'll be heading over to, and I can announce this now, I'll be heading over to San Diego at the end of March to speak at Traffic and Conversion Summit.
Whoa.
Which is probably going to be my biggest gig in terms of audience. The smallest room that they have holds 1,000 people. So as long as some people turn up, it's most likely going to be my biggest audience in terms of people. So that's pretty cool.
Wow.
I'll be speaking about YouTube keyword research to a whole ton of keyword research and SEO enthusiasts. So yeah, it should be pretty cool.
Very cool. You're going to become too big for us.
Oh, never. This is home. I know where my bread's buttered. Oh, although having said that about knowing where my bread's buttered, my speaking gig is actually on my wife's birthday. So yeah,
you're going to have to pay for that one.
It's one of those. Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But really, it's like, yeah, you got to pay for this. So luckily, she does not listen to this podcast.
Join the club.
What about you, Carlos? What's life like in Toronto this week?
Right now, this week is rocking and rolling because I'm being kicked out of my house as of in the next couple of days. And by the time this episode goes up, it'll be hopefully fixed. But a couple months ago, I had a flood and our floors are destroyed. And the insurance company needs us to completely move out for the next 3 weeks. And it's going to be very chaotic. Luckily enough, we live in a typical Toronto condo, and luckily enough, I found a place within the building to move into for the next 3 weeks. But yeah, that's sort of like the thing that's prepared for us. In terms of work-wise, I would say it's a rocking and rolling where I'm working now with Just for Laughs again, and I'm diving into the whole Facebook monetization side of things. And I'm realizing just how rudimentary Facebook is.
Yeah.
And how I asked the rep for information and they did not know. And it's like, this is somebody who's in charge of talent and, monetization stuff in Canada, right? And it's like one of the things that, we know as Canadians in this industry is that the reps and the people in the offices in Canada are almost like these invisible people within the company. It's like, oh yeah, sure. But they'll play you along, but at the end of the day, they have no power and they don't know much, and they just have to talk to the head office in San Francisco, right? And it's jumping into that world. Also, realizing just how much YouTube doesn't like people like us. It's true, because I have a client who invited me to a YouTube event, and then YouTube literally said, and even though the clients made it perfectly transparent that I'm in charge of their YouTube strategy, the YouTube said, no, it's only for you. And to me, that shows that YouTube just does not like it that, we know too much. And they want to sell the YouTube advertising ecosystem as opposed to the YouTube, as of building a channel organically type of.
Yeah, I was speaking to a client only yesterday, and because they had a problem, and because they were under 100,000, they didn't have a partner manager, and because the problem was with their AdSense account, they were no longer partners, so they couldn't even get any kind of support. But how do you fix the problem if you can't get support? And then I was just saying, if I really had to, get out of a pinch, there are people that I could go to. But generally, as soon as I've left kind of the big media companies, my YouTube contacts really don't want to know me anymore, which is kind of strange. You can understand they've got limited time and it has to be dedicated to their preferred partners. But I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks, we are experts, but also we're advocates for the platform. We're helping people grow their channels, make more money. So it's in YouTube's best interest to keep us on side, and even having to re-up my my certification since they changed the certification program again back in October and have made it private. It's almost impossible for somebody on the outside to get in. Luckily, I've got very great Portuguese mafia contacts in Toronto that help me out. So I am now certified. But yeah, it's definitely made me feel like a bit of an outsider, which is a strange move, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. It is. Anyways, enough about us complaining, shaking our fists at the air.
That was slightly more than a sprinkling of snot. That was like that was a cup full of snot.
Yeah, exactly. First off, I want to apologize for my audio quality. It's a bit we're having a mic issue on my end. But before we get started, let's thank who is sponsoring this show. Thank you, TubeBuddy. TubeBuddy has been a sponsor since the start of the show, and we really appreciate it. TubeBuddy is the ultimate tool for creators to streamline their daily workflow on YouTube, allowing for more time for great content, for brands to help reduce busy work and focus on what matters, growing your business on YouTube, for agencies to help manage multiple channels, and for networks to give partners incentives and tools, and an attractive incentive for recruitment.
You can get an exclusive multi-channel discount license by visiting www.videoinsiders.fm/TubeBuddy. And that is an exclusive discount that you can only get through being one of our fellow video insiders.
Awesome. So this week we're on a roll in terms of talking to fellow entrepreneurs, fellow experts in this field, and we have quite a few interviews banked at this point. This is one of mine that I've been trying to get for months, but he's a very elusive person. Just like us, a little bit of introvert, which is great. We love introverts. Mark is the founder of ReelSEO, which became Tubular Insights. He now heads the business track at VidCon. He's been doing it for the last couple of years. He's been in the space for something like close to 10 years. Oh, and actually more like 13 years. He knows a lot. He's seen it all. He's a little bit jaded, a little bit like us. Mark, you've spoken at VidCon. Tell me a little bit about, your relationship with him.
Yeah, Mark is absolutely one of my favorite people in the industry. Not only because he, for some reason, continues to invite me back to speak at the various amazing VidCon events around the world, but Mark is just like you say, you'd say shy. I'd say he was really humble because he's probably the smartest guy in the industry. When he talks, you need to listen. When he gives presentations, you need to be in the room because he just gives no nonsense advice, no frills. He's just telling you how it is. And there's things he's forgotten about YouTube and SEO that most people in the industry haven't even learned yet. So he's really one of the OGs of YouTube. And, I've had the pleasure of having dinner with him and drinks and stuff, but I've never really got to dive into too much his story or, his opinions on a lot of stuff yet. So really looking forward to hearing a bit more in-depth stuff from Mark because, he doesn't do this a lot. He doesn't do a lot of podcasts. He doesn't, he's not really one for the spotlight. So yeah, really interested to see, and I'm sure the audience are as well, what Mark has to say on the state of the industry, basically.
Cool. Yeah. So let's not spend too much time. Let's get straight up to it. And just as a little side note, we've been having a lot of audio issues, and let's get to it. This week, I finally get to talk to Mark Robertson, who is somebody I've been, in a way, stalking for the past 7 to 8 years. Mark is as the founder of ReelSEO, now called Tubular Insights. He is a social video marketing expert, popular speaker, and passionate thought leader within the online video and search marketing industries. Me and him have sort of been Twitter buddies for the past couple of years and liking each other's tweets and all that sort of stuff. And I've been wanting to have a conversation with him for a long time. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I'm stoked too. We've been following each other forever, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. We totally, clicked once we started talking to each other. So it's been a great to connect. I want to get right into the questions. Okay,
cool.
We're going to go with some very basic questions, so don't worry about it. I'm not going to grill you with anything too complicated.
Yeah.
But, ReelSEO was started in 2017, so going on 13 years of you being in the space. Back in the day, it was mostly about marketing SEO. From my perspective, it's always been about marketing SEO. But anyways, did you ever?
We could riff on that for a bit too. No, I agree with you.
Did you ever imagine you'd be drowning in the world of millions of channels at this point?
Honestly, I don't. I was so. Let me backtrack a little. Before ReelSEO, the reason I started it was I was a search engine optimization guy, and about 2 years prior to starting it, I was working at a media company as the director of interactive, and rolled out across 50 newspaper divisions this product where people could, small businesses could buy video, have that produced, and then put up syndicated on the web. And of course, in 2006 and 2007, that's when YouTube hit. So for me, it started as really just something I was interested in learning more about myself, and as well as educating others. And I don't think I did ever imagine or specifically think about the fact that we'd have millions of channels and influencers everywhere. I think it was sort of something I assumed would happen, that video would take over once the technology caught up with it, and certainly it did. But no, it's pretty amazing how there's an entire ecosystem of people involved in online video, and a lot of people growing up now, that's a career that they're highlighting for themselves. So I was, to your point, I was much more interested in the dynamics of the technology and how, as marketers, we could take advantage of that and optimize for that, and how storytelling was evolving. And I was less in tune with the entertainment and media side.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like even back then, you only thought of YouTube as YouTube, right? Almost like Netflix nowadays, right? It would be just YouTube. You didn't expect to have mini networks within it, mini ecosystems within it that it's turned out to be at this point.
No, I mean, if you think about it, that was the iPhone in 2007. It was, we didn't even have cameras on our phones. No. And HTML5 was another, I want to say 5 years out. So the fact that most people have an amazing video recording device on them at all times, I don't know that I saw that coming as quickly as it did. And I really think that's part of the reason why everything has grown to the fact that now we've got millions of people doing this.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah.
So obviously, just reiterating that fact, like you've been in the ecosystem for so long, you've been paying attention to this ecosystem longer than most of us. Actually, you've seen it all. Is there anything out there, like being, other than platforms, but is there anything that really excites you, like in terms of is it like new creators, or is it just like the new companies, trying new things? And are you just blasé at this point?
I'd say, let's be honest, a little of both. No, but I definitely, there's things that excite me that get me really interested. Again, it tends to root itself in the technology side. So, I'm really interested in the way AI is being used, in machine learning, and how it's going to affect things. It's going to be very interesting in the coming years, and in fact, probably this year as well, to be able to know whether or not an actual human recorded what you're watching, or whether or not it was manipulated. That's on the technology side, but honestly, this isn't exciting for everybody, but the ad ecosystem and the marketing opportunities still excite me. I still love that when you can find something that is some low-hanging fruit or something that you didn't realize you could take advantage of, and really get your message out, your awareness out, even, direct conversion using video. It's like we're finally getting to a point, I think, where we can much better measure ROI than we used to.
Yeah. And that's something that, like, most creators out there don't even think about, right? It's
right.
Funny enough, let's make it more about me, but I just had an email exchange with a potential client where he was like, he has a business, he's a doctor, and he was making videos. And I was saying, wow, that's awesome. There's not a lot of doctors making videos. And he was too focused on the monetization part. And I was like, wait, you're on here just to try to make money from the videos? You're a doctor, for crying out loud. Use this to, help people, learn what you do and drive people to your business where you'll make way more money than anything YouTube's going to give you for a long time. So I think that the space, the noise around the monetization, and I personally, again, this is Carlos going on a tangent here, but I personally am completely annoyed by the press, specifically Business Insider, who just focuses on how much money YouTubers make more than anything else, not about like strategy or what it really does or what's the real opportunity there. But
right.
I think that gets washed out a lot in the media.
Well, you just covered so many things. I mean, Business Insider, they're a publication. They need to get readers and viewers, and obviously that's what people are interested in. But I hear you on the noise. I understand very well that there's creators who this is their living, and when there's a change to monetization or when it's not as transparent how things are going, it's upsetting. At the same time, I understand that YouTube is a free service. A lot of this, we don't pay to have our videos hosted. We don't pay to get an audience for the most part. And then I also understand that YouTube sort of created this ecosystem of monetization and this assumption by pretty much anyone who uploads a video to YouTube that they can become rich off of it. It's not YouTube's fault. It's not the creators that are doing well's fault. And it's not exactly the media's fault, but it is noise in many cases. And I think if you look at the internet as a whole, any business that's really been hugely successful, anyone that I can think of off the top of my head, started by not being concerned about monetization. How can we get the most people to our cause? How can we, think about Gmail and Google and anything I could think of. Monetization was always secondary to growing an audience and support. And that was the same with my blog and ReelSEO at the time. That's the same, there's obviously some side cases where people go viral or people have very specific goals around monetization from the outset and they're successful. But I think most businesses and most people that are incredibly successful online have done that by focusing on what they love to do, doing it for the sake of getting their message out, and then monetization happened.
Yeah. I think that's the sense. I personally believe in that as well. As I've seen channels explode and then die out and all that sort of stuff. It's when they lose focus on what they love as opposed to just getting an audience or just monetization. Things get a little bit murky. So
it's the same with the algorithm noise, right?
Yeah,
we hear that a lot. It comes from a place that I understand, which is people do get concerned, and I've had issues with algorithms affecting my business before. It's frustrating, but we've got friends in the industry who are more vocal, say on video, like Roberto Blake and Tim Schmoyer and Daryl Eves, and all of those people will tell you that to rely solely on one platform's monetization program is probably part of the problem. You have to really expand what it is that you're focused on, and if you build the audience, then you can monetize it.
Yeah, Yeah, and then I literally just got off. I just recorded an episode with Stuart Bertelstar, which is a local creator who got bit by that many years ago because he was all in on Vine. Decided to be super focused on that because he was doing well, but he learned quickly that that things can change very quickly, and he's evolved beyond that, and he's learned now to not just base himself on just one platform. I think people are smarter nowadays. But
I mean, I'll tell you a little secret that only a few people know, and that's that in 2012 and 13, I was hit real SEO by a Google algorithm change. It wasn't a penalty or anything like that. It had a lot to do with the type of site that we were and Panda, and it drastically affected my livelihood as well as the future of where I was going with that business. I didn't know what to do, and it was because at the time, almost all of my monetization was driven by organic traffic and Google Ads share. And so it was, even as somebody who I've been doing SEO since 2000, white hat, never black hat, and always follow the algorithm. And in fact, this was a website to tell people how to best work with Google and YouTube at the time. Even I got hit by it. So yeah, I certainly understand the noise, but I do think it's essentially that when you focus on the right things.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, we're just in the middle of the craziness of Byte as we speak, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to see. The funny part is that, what I'm kind of hoping happens is like there's just so much goodwill towards Vine that people are just jumping on it, and there's like nobody has like, I don't know if anybody, and again, I'm a little bit outside of that ecosystem, but I don't feel like people love TikTok. They're just there because it's the platform that's going viral more than anything else. But I don't, and this is just a surface level review, but I just felt like the whole internet went nuts when Byte was launched, and I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I've been on the beta for a couple of weeks. Made some mistakes, like the fact that I could have had almost any profile name. I think there was very few beta testers. So I could have had like LOL as my profile. I'm sure there's a lot of creators upset that others are taking their handles. Yeah. But no, I think, with TikTok, I've seen both. I've seen, people of our generation more interested in it because of its quick rise as well as its adoption, and let's be on there and let's figure it out. Let's not miss this opportunity. But then, if you talk to my nieces, they absolutely are on it all the time, and they love it, and they shoot videos for it. And there's a lot of passion around the platform and the creativity on it. At the same time, to your point with the Byte app, when it launched, it was like, there's a ton of goodwill towards Vine, towards the Vine co-creator. And I think there's a lot of things that I know that they're doing right. One of which is they're at least stating that they're going to announce a pretty robust creator monetization program in the very near future. And so, that's certainly interesting too, especially when we're in an era where, it seems like there should be more competition than there is. And so I think all of us kind of get excited when there's the possibility of a new platform, not competing per se, but at least more options.
Yeah. And then, as somebody who's recently recently working with a couple of like high profile clients that have like pretty decent Facebook monetization setup, it's fascinating just how rudimentary Facebook is in terms of its systems and helping big content creators like understand what's happening and the monetization ecosystem. I'll give you a quick anecdote. I had a chat with a Facebook rep that literally didn't know if their piracy protection monetizes the way YouTube's piracy protection monetizes. And we look at the reports, they're sort of saying that it does, and the rep's telling me that it doesn't. So yeah, there's a lack of education internally and understanding of what the hell is happening with the system. At least from a Canadian perspective, Canada often gets the short stick in this space. So,
I've definitely heard similar things. I think Facebook rolled things out very quickly. A lot of good a lot of mistakes. Some of the simplicity in their system is nice because it makes sense to have certain things simplified. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of confusion, especially around the monetization program and the rights management.
Yeah.
And then you got Instagram and IGTV, which are interesting in they have such a huge footprint that they're quite successful, but you're seeing them gradually change some of the policies and some of the ways in which they ask creators to do things. So, it's an interesting time right now, I think.
Yeah. There's an opportunity there to, again, like everybody jumped on Facebook. We talk, we're speaking, it's been a couple of weeks since the news about, what's the Chinese comedy, the comedy network who's just going bankrupt. I forget what it was.
Oh yeah. College Humor. Yeah.
College Humor. Yeah. Right. And going sort of like, closing shop. And it's like, they basically admitted that, their bet on Facebook destroyed them. Right. And among many things, but like when I look at the networks who were standing the test of time, they didn't jump into one platform and spend a crap ton of money just because the platform promised them something. They test and they check it out and they take their time, and that's one thing that I feel sometimes people in the entertainment business or publishing industry tend to not do.
Yeah,
jump in.
Yeah, I don't know, and I think in many cases, over the past 20 years, we've seen the media industry change so much from newspapers basically saying goodbye to cable companies and cutting the cord, and now video being on any single device anywhere. Now the 5G's coming out. So at the same time, I and having worked at a media company many years ago, I understand they're kind of they're fighting to stay alive, so they're throwing their money into whatever they can. But a lot of companies put a lot of money into Facebook video specifically, and didn't see it pan out the way they had hoped. So it's interesting to where do you put the blame there? But yeah.
So we haven't really talked about this, but you work for VidCon, right? You've been there for just at least 2 years now, right?
Yeah, so I'm actually a contractor, but I work quite a bit with them. And I've been actually to 9 of the 10 VidCons. So I've always really supported what they do and what VidCon's about. And I'm a good friend with Jim Louderback, who's the CEO. And in 2016, I helped put on some of the industry workshops. And so 2 years ago, he reached out to me since I was free and asked if I would be interested in doing some more of that for VidCon. So the last 2 years, I've been doing a lot of the industry track programming and working on the websites as I can to help with marketing. And it's been exciting, and they're up to some really interesting things. I think you know this, but I'm not sure how many of your audience know. We just announced last month that we're going to be in the Middle East for the first time this year. Yeah. So I'm involved with that. That should be interesting too.
That's going to be really interesting. We actually did a podcast. One of our early podcasts is VidCon worth it?
Yeah.
And we agreed that it was. But especially for people like us, we're not front of the line, very public people. So it was sort of like a little bit of insight, and we talked about our experiences with it. And I'll admittedly only been there once, but
right.
Since your experience, obviously it's gone from like something that was small in a way, but to something that's huge now. Is it approaching 100,000 in the U.S.? people?
Oh yeah, it's they do attendance in an interesting way, which is an aggregate. But I believe, and I wish I had this right in front of me, but I believe last year there was around 80,000 in total for the U.S. So that doesn't account the other events, and a good majority of that, of course, is a community track, and then next largest is a creator track. But the industry track last year in the U.S. was larger than any year prior, and was up 40%. So, it is, all events are expensive and travel is expensive, but we've been following each other for 7 or 8 years on Twitter. It's nice when you have a place that you can go and meet the people you've been working with for years and actually face to face and get things done. And we also, of course, on the programming side, I do try and bring in innovative workshops and training where even people like us find some value in that. So it's been an interesting and fun ride. I think VidCon is doing some really interesting things, and it's just one of the pieces of glue that the industry needs.
Yeah. And just to bring it back to my chat with Stuart, who's actually launching Social Media North. He's trying to create VidCon in Canada because you guys aren't in Canada. So keep an eye on him. I've certainly, I've told you this, but I've lived in Canada and I used to go there every year as a child to Toronto because my family's from there. And so I have certainly mentioned on a few occasions that I wish there had been or there would be a VidCon in Canada. Those discussions are above me though. So, but I do wonder, I haven't really, how's the Buffer Festival? That's in Canada, right? Is that still? No comment on that one? Well,
no comment.
Well, no, I'll give you my insight. So for those who don't know, Buffer Festival is about 3 to 4 years old now. It was started by a prominent YouTuber. It jumped much more into this sort of like indie filmmaking or online filmmaking ecosystem as opposed to the YouTuber ecosystem. I would say it was doing well up until the CBC got involved. In 2 cents. Mm-hmm. Essentially, CBC bought it. And essentially, it's as if NPR bought VidCon, right?
Right.
And, it's turned into something. It's just it doesn't have the wins behind it the same way VidCon has the momentum behind it. So I think there's something to be said about when it's created by the creators and for creators as opposed to VidCon's been bought by a big company, so it's weird, but. At the end of the day, it's still going. It's just I don't feel like it speaks to the indie creator the way VidCon does, and that's why I believe that Stuart Brittlestar is creating Social Media North, and he's doing it outside of the city, which is better because obviously in the city it's expensive to create a conference, and he's doing his first year in Stratford, which is away from Toronto, and. He's expecting a few hundred people, maybe 500 people to show up, and to go into a small town like that, it's pretty great. So I'm hoping it happens. I'm actually going to be speaking there, and there's a few people, a few prominent creators going there at this point. But I don't know where I was going with that, but it was sort of like saying how the opportunity is there's still sort of burgeoning ecosystems in this space, and I think it's fascinating to see.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I absolutely love working with VidCon and everyone that goes there, but there's definitely room for many other events, and I see those happening. I'll definitely keep an eye on Social Media North. Maybe I'll head up and listen to you speak.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. The funny part is that I'll totally be admitted. I asked Stuart last week, and he's like, you have me on, but you haven't told me what you want me to talk about. It's like, we're going to figure it out. Don't worry about it.
That's smart.
Obviously you've been in and around the bend, and, we're both much grayer than we used to be. I would say I speak more for myself because I'm not looking at you right now. But how do you feel about the next year? Every year's rocking and rolling. And I had Matt Gillen a couple of weeks ago, and we both sort of realized wow, 2019 was such a rock and roll year. Feels like we want things to be a little bit calmer this year. I think everybody sort of wants everything to be a little bit calmer this year. And I feel like it is so far, other than, media drama, news drama. But what are you thinking about 2020 in terms of these online platforms? And I'm saying this as Byte is blowing up, right?
Right. Is
it going to be new platforms, or is it going to be everybody's settling in? I think it's going to be a little bit of both, as usual. But anyways, I'm going to shut up.
No, I do think last year was actually the last couple of years have been really interesting in terms of changes for creators, and in some cases noise, and in some cases really valid concerns. YouTube is not going anywhere, but I do think I think this year will be interesting. I say this every year. I would love to see more competitors. I don't know who that would be. I don't know that Byte's an interesting platform, and I think there's room for lots. But I do see hopefully some maturity in terms of areas and ways in which creators can get their message out and make money. But I think I'm with both of you in that my hope is, and it does feel like it so far this year, that for creators this year will be hopefully a more smooth ride. And I don't think that will be the case when it comes to ad dollars and media, especially with the elections in the U.S. coming up, deep fakes and other things that a lot of people are concerned about. I think we're going to continue to see some concerns with Facebook privacy, other privacy issues. But I think I'm with both of you. I think I feel so far this year that, even with COPPA, it's not. There was a lot of talk about how devastating that would be, and I guess the jury's still out. But it feels like it hasn't been. Like it will be a nicer year for creators. Mm-hmm. I hope.
Yeah. Anecdotally, like I've recently got the access to a quite substantial kids channel, and COPPA's decimated it. Like it makes no sense to see a channel with 4 million subscribers go from making a few $1,000s a year. This was like a dormant channel, so but a few $1,000s a month to it'll be lucky if it breaks $500 a month. And this is evergreen content, right? And at the same time, going from consistently growing to losing, 500 to 600 subscribers a day. So it's there. It's just that people aren't as vocal as they were a couple of months ago. And they're just scrambling to move on to figure something out.
Right.
I know a couple of YouTubers who, their content touches the kids scene, and obviously they were flagged, and a couple of their videos are flagged. And so they're like, okay, well, our content's going to shift to be a little bit more comedy, pranky, all that sort of stuff to age up a bit. And that's what essentially everybody's sort of, using their runway money maybe to just, figure things out and evolve. And again, just anecdotally, and this, I don't know if this is something you've heard from others in the ecosystem, I'm seeing channels that weren't in the kids ecosystem completely blow up in the last couple weeks. Monetization's up, volume's up, everything's going up. And me and Tom are sort of debating on this, and we're thinking that the kids channels, the kid algorithm has created is being filled by adult content.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's possible. I've heard similar things anecdotally around, the fact that some channels that are clearly focus on children's content are suffering as a result of the changes. At the same time, I struggle a bit with that because, the YouTube was never made as a platform for 13-year-olds. And so I kind of understand the desire to put that content elsewhere or treat it differently. So I think, in most cases, a lot of those channels are having a hard time. I think the channels that were most concerned were the ones that thought perhaps there's some children watching their content, but their content isn't necessarily child focused. And I've seen some of them have had some issues, but for the most part, it seems like it's been a pretty smooth ride. And then to your point, I've seen some channels that are clearly not children's content, never were, and they're not having any issues. So I guess that the jury's still out on that. I think it could have been handled a bit better in the communication. And it's, some people say it's the FTC, and some people say it's YouTube. And anyway, we can talk for an hour about that.
It's an inside joke in terms of Google. It's YouTube and Google are the biggest marketing company, but they're the worst communicators.
Yeah, there's certainly been a desire by many to see better communication from that company.
Yeah, again, as somebody who's dealing with Facebook right now, okay, I'll give Google the edge right now, but it's not a big one. And
that's an improvement, in all honesty, from the feedback I've heard over the last 4 years or so. I think YouTube's done pretty well in making some changes over the last 2 years in particular. But I remember 2 years ago, people just wondering why aren't they communicating at all, and yet Facebook was. And So yeah, it's definitely interesting. Always changing.
Yeah. I mean, I'll definitely give it to them that things have gotten better and are communicating. I do feel like they do pull the wool in front of me. When I talk to clients, and these are clients where Google is wooing them and YouTube's trying to get them to come to the office and stuff like that. And I'll be perfectly frank, they definitely don't want me there when those invites. I literally had a client tell me, it's like, hey, you want to come? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, they literally hired me to fully manage their YouTube stuff. And YouTube literally told them, it's like, no, we just want the client. I know exactly why they do that, because they know that I'm going to be like, that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. and tell the client the truth. Well, again, Google has its goals, right? It's an advertising company. That's what you need to understand as somebody in the audience, is they're not a content company. So, that's what they're trying to sell all the time. So, and I tend to want to go on a rant these days, but that's. I
was just going to rant about what you said. I think one of the things I hear, because they are an advertising company, I think they don't want to be seen as a content company, but by mere fact of what they do, they've in a way become one. But more than anything, in my opinion, they're a data company. Mm-hmm. And if they can get any piece of data they could possibly get, that will eventually help with advertising. It'll help with a lot of things. And so every video they upload, I mean, every frame, every second is data to train their algorithms and to train what's a bit scary. We won't get into it here, but the artificial intelligence that's coming very soon.
Yeah, that part is weird. So, we won't drag this too much longer, but, you said something before where one of the questions every couple of months, especially in 2019, is YouTube was over. There's always new platforms, as we mentioned a couple minutes ago. Byte is new, and new things come and go. I've always I have my thoughts, my perspective on it, and I think you've also sort of brought some points that sort of prove it. Is like, why do you think YouTube seems to be standing the test of time? You look at Facebook and Instagram. Yes, they're doing something, but they're having a hard time. Whereas YouTube is just like staying steady and growing. Obviously, the growth will slow, but what is keeping it relevant? What's keeping it going?
That's a good question. I mean, I think YouTube's definitely not dead and won't be anytime soon. But I've seen so many platforms come and go where I thought they had a chance and they just didn't. And part of it is they're owned by Google, and they have tremendous resources, and overhead's really, really expensive. But they're at a point now where that's shared. A lot of that overhead. So, but I think honestly, it's a couple things that got them where they are. One, I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, but the name alone, YouTube. I mean, the first time I heard the word YouTube, I didn't the next day say, what was the name of that company again?
Yeah.
It's like, it's so obvious. And it's so pointed at what the platform is about, which is online video. It's not, Facebook Watch or some bizarre name for a platform. So I think that's part of it. The other is a couple things. One, they really were the first company or the first platform to provide a super easy way for people to share video. I mean, they launched at the same time there were still, WMV movie files where you'd have to copy the link and share it with your friend. And yet they had this embeddable code that, now everyone has. But I think that really helped in the early days. And then the fact now that basically they embraced mobile as quickly, if not more quickly, than Apple did. And so it's totally perfect for mobile. Everybody has it in their pocket. And because of that shareability and the name, press refers to it everywhere and all the time. So now there's so many things that make it an amazing platform that's standing the test of time. But I think we touched on a few of them. I think the mass alone, it's hard to see that dying without something really tragic or huge happening. And there's certainly been some concerning things that have happened, but YouTube's worked quickly, and Google too, to get everybody on the same page or resolve those. It's just such a large platform. I don't think we're going to see it go away anytime soon, and I honestly don't know that we're going to see any competitors rival it.
Especially the size, the scale is going to be hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's for given niches. People, everybody starts on YouTube. It's the easiest to start up. Everybody knows it. There's no barrier to entry. At a certain point, though, the size of creators is so large that you wonder, you wonder about the viewership, and is it harder to get your message through with so much competition? But day in and day out, it proves that people are doing that. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. That could be a super long conversation, but
yeah,
they've done a lot of things right. And I remember when Google bought YouTube, there was so much talk over how much money they spent. Oh my gosh, they spent so much on YouTube, and what a great investment.
Yeah.
And then to my earlier point, you can think about not just the audience they have and the support they have and the money they make, but the data, the pure amount of data, audio, visual, text that we have been giving to YouTube and Google that they can then make sense of is amazing. So I think, I think we'll continue to see YouTube be the place for, I can't really foresee for the foreseeable future, see anything else.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about, for me, it's always been the search. Like the fact that search is the core of it, it really helps. Whereas, you look at Facebook and anybody who's sort of like tried to be in a space, it's like, yeah, you put a video up and then you sort of like lose it. You'll never find it again.
Yeah, it's a little more ephemeral.
Yeah, and I think the social ecosystem isn't a good ecosystem for long-term growth for videos in general. But that's just me. But
yeah, I mean, a lot of us thought, and when Facebook launched video in a bigger way, like what was it 2016, 2015, they obviously had a leg up when it comes to the social component, and it is an interesting difference between YouTube, who's always tried to nail the social component, maybe hasn't as much. But the one thing, going back to the noise we were talking about earlier, and I get it, but when you think about the algorithm and the algorithms, really, there's so many in YouTube, that's really a lot of the magic. I mean, when YouTube makes, they're testing things all the time, obviously, and there's experiments going on all the time, but when they make a change, you could be fairly rest assured it's because they have noticed that it helps. So, I remember, I think it was 2017 when the recommended videos on the sidebar that used to be from the same channel, that they ended up using the deep neural networks for the recommendation algorithm, and creators were just fuming. Why aren't my videos showing up to the right? And I was thinking to myself, just hang in there, because YouTube knows that this is going to drive more views, more watch time, and that if you're doing the right things, that will benefit you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm kind of riffing off you talked about it being a search place, but their algorithms are so advanced that I can go somewhere, open up YouTube, not even logged in, and it already knows that I would prefer, or that there's a high chance I prefer this type of content versus my niece.
Yeah. I focus on search because I do a lot of that optimization on the back end, and I think it pays off, but especially because I love, library content and, optimizing that. And, but every single time I go on YouTube on my iPad, on my phone, and I just go there and I want to watch something, but I don't know what. It amazes me the stuff that they recommend that I'm not subscribed to, that I'm like, wow, this is exactly what I want to watch right now. So.
No, and actually, I was just thinking, I can't forget to mention this, but the fact that, Google, everybody uses Google. It's like, I want to say it's 98% in terms of search traffic. I might be a little high there, but not everybody uses Bing or any other solution anymore. And YouTube is perfectly positioned for that. A lot of traffic to YouTube comes from Google, especially some of that search traffic. So yeah, I mean, I certainly can't think of a better platform for library content or evergreen content anywhere. I mean, if if you learn of anything, I'd be totally interested. But if you have content that people may be looking for in 5 years, I don't know where a better place to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I give you a quick little sort of like anecdote from. I recently started working with Just for Laughs again, and seeing like all my old channels that I set up back then. And there was a channel that they uploaded about 100 videos on that we had set up. This is talking about 2013 here.
Wow.
It's literally never been touched for in 7 years now. And literally last month, it blew up. And I'm like, what the hell is happening? All of a sudden, I went from like 0 to 100,000 subscribers within a few months. Wow. So yeah, that's the stuff that just like makes me so happy to see the content I managed to do. Same thing with like another client that I have that has had this video about that they uploaded a couple years ago about frozen iguanas. And then guess what happened this week, right? Florida got a freeze, and all of a sudden that video just popped. Right? And I love seeing that. I love showing that as case studies. I recently did an audit for a channel that they do a lot of cooking and amazing cake stuff. And I said, well, I was looking at the insights and looking at how search affects their stuff, and just pulled an old case study where another chef channel had this like Christmas cake or some sort of like, it was sort of like a Christmas cake that's regional here. And every year it popped, and every year it popped bigger than the year before. And I said, this is why it's still so important to make sure your content is search friendly on this system, because it just pays off in the long run. And
100%. I mean, certainly there's some variances depending on the type of content you're putting up and in terms of how much focus you put on the search piece of the algorithm. But there's, in my opinion, this is one thing that always gets me is, it does take time to come up to do the research, and thank God for tools out there like TubeBuddy and vidIQ and some of the others. But it takes some time to do the keyword research, to understand your audience, to craft titles that are relevant and yet optimized and catchy, and thumbnails and stuff. But then again, how much money in many cases, people are spending, several $1,000s, if not more, on a given video. They're doing script writing, they're doing shooting, they're doing editing, post, all sorts of production. And then, it comes down to, can you spend an hour when you're putting that up to really make sure it does the best it can? Yeah. And time in, time out, I see that a lot of people don't. So, I'm ranting.
It's all good.
I'm babbling now.
It's audio that we don't pay by the minute. Mark, it's been awesome to riff with you.
Yeah, man.
Tell us, where should the audience pay attention to you? I'm assuming Twitter is your go-to platform.
Yeah, it's just as much as I tell everybody that I work with how they should be using social and how it's important in YouTube. I am somewhat of an introvert, and I don't do a lot of that myself at the moment. So yeah, I am on Twitter. It's Mark R. Robertson. I'm on LinkedIn as well, although I'm not quite as active just because I feel there's a lot of spam at the moment, but that happens everywhere. But yeah, there, and then obviously at any VidCon, certainly through this year, the US, I'll be doing that as well. So
awesome. I'll be linking those in the show notes just to let everybody know. And don't worry about being an introvert. You're literally on the perfect podcast for that. That's our audience.
I think I'm I'm right in the middle, because when I want to turn it on, I turn it on. But then after I've had 2 hours of talking with people, I need to go in my cave and take a nap.
No, that's exactly what an introvert is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm an introvert.
It's one of those things where it's for the most part, you just want to be in your cave and with your family and all your close ones, and then when you're on, you're just on, and then you just need 3 weeks of leave me alone.
Yeah. I'd love to have people follow me on Twitter. You may get upset that I occasionally will bitch about a company that, like DoorDash, who screws up a delivery, but for the most part, I like to share information as it relates to what we do.
This is why we get along, because I do exactly the same thing yesterday. We didn't talk to Hover because they've turned into such spammers. And no comment. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very much, Mark, for being on the episode. And as you said, Tom, he's extremely humble, and he kept telling me, it's like, oh, if I'm not interesting enough, like, don't worry, you won't hurt my feelings. And I was like, are you nuts? This was like fascinating, a conversation. Me and him and you and a couple other people in this world, we totally spent hours just geeking out in this space, over drinks. So yeah, like I would have him back in an instant. Tom, what you think?
Yeah, absolutely fascinating to hear more of Mark's story. Like you say, very kind of kindred spirits, I think. We hold a lot of very, very similar views. And, just to hear him say stuff like when he got started on YouTube, like people didn't even have cameras on their phones. That's how OG Mark is. So he paved the way for all of the so-called experts. And ReelSEO was actually where I got a lot of my early information from, because if you hear my story, which you can hear in a previous episode, I started on YouTube for the BBC with zero experience. So I was literally Googling like how to create a subscribe link, and it was all ReelSEO. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly.
Huge hat tip to Mark there. I think probably the biggest kind of things that I kind of there wasn't anything that I disagreed with, but the biggest points that he made that I did really resonated with me was when he was talking about it really saddens him when there's an algorithm change or a policy change and creators kind of fall by the wayside. But at the same time, he appreciates that YouTube is running a business, not a charity, and it's kind of the cost of doing business on somebody else's platform. So you need to diversify your revenue streams.
Yeah, exactly.
I was really interested in his take on YouTube continually failing at social over the years, and I'd never really thought about it like that. But when you think of Google Plus and no one's using stories, no one's really using the community tab to great, at least not in great volumes anyway. I don't know if anyone's using story. I don't even know if I've ever seen a YouTube story. So yeah, I just think they've had like Messenger that's gone away now. It's all kind of it's interesting. It's really interesting, that take. I'd never really thought about it, but when you look back, it's a history of a failed kind of social video. But the kind of biggest thing that I took away was the memory of when he was talking about when YouTube changed the suggested sidebar structure, because when I first started, you were guaranteed the first 3 or 4 spots in that suggested sidebar. So those were the good old days. And now helping clients to dominate those organically is a lot harder than that. But I remember in Amsterdam a few years ago, Mark gave a talk, and it was something along the lines of algorithm, schmalgorithm. So something like that, because it's like, he's right. It's a giant thing that's probably like self-aware now, that's just growing all the time, millions of lines of code. And it's so easy for people to get caught up in, this is how the algorithm works, this is what you need to do. Oh, has the algorithm changed? But really, it's all about doing the fundamentals right, so that you're kind of algorithm proof. Make good content, make sure that it's optimized within reason, and make sure you're making content that people actually want to see. And outside of those 3, everything else is kind of tactical. So yeah, I love Mark's kind of outlook on algorithms and not getting too fixated on that kind of
stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, like, he's got so much experience in this space, and it's again, he's a super asset and super connected. Every time I would talk to him about anybody specifically, it's like, oh yeah, I know him. And obviously, managing the industry track at VidCon, sort of, you get to know pretty much everybody in the scene. So it was just again, it's just not some humble guy to talk to.
Yeah, and if either of us were ever to be hit by a bus, I think Mark could easily step into the fray and be a co-host, because by going by his Twitter alone, he's got plenty of sprinkles of snark with him.
You're absolutely right. If ever, Mark, if ever you're looking for a gig other than becoming a YouTube star.
Yeah, and if you're looking for the latest YouTube or Google SEO news, or you just love hearing companies being shamed on Twitter, then make sure you're following Mark on Twitter as well.
Awesome. So thanks again. Thanks for listening, obviously. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new episode. We have a lot of interviews lined up. We're trying to sort of diversify and get other voices in, because obviously we're opinionated, but we want to hear other people sort of reaffirm our opinions.
And if they disagree, we don't want to listen to them.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for listening. Obviously, if you enjoy this podcast, please give us a shout out on the socials at Video Insiders. On Twitter is our main sort of like active one, because every other one is sort of like meh. We obviously on the Apple Podcast app, where everybody gets discovered these days. And obviously share this podcast with anybody in your ecosystem that, is as passionate about this ecosystem as us. Thanks a lot.
And we cannot go without saying another huge thank you to our incredible sponsor, TubeBuddy. Thank you, TubeBuddy. And remember, if you want to get your hands on that exclusive Video Insiders TubeBuddy discount, you can do so by visiting videoinsiders.fm/TubeBuddy.
Awesome. Have a good one.
See you soon.